All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about how you can build a zero-trust security model right inside your AWS environment. Now, this isn't about just building bigger firewalls or stronger walls. Nope. This is about completely rethinking how we do security for the modern cloud from the ground up. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll kick things off by looking at the old castle and moat security model and, why it's basically falling apart. Then we'll dive into the zero trust mindset itself. From there, we'll get practical and see how you can actually build it using native AWS tools. We'll also hit on some of the real-world challenges and finally wrap up by looking at how all of this completely changes your security game for the better.
First up, let's talk about that old way of thinking about security. You know the one? That hard, crunchy outer shell with a soft, trusted center. It's an idea that's been around forever, but in the cloud, it just doesn't work anymore.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem, right? The whole castle and moat idea was built on having a strong outer wall. If you were inside, you were trusted. Simple. But in the cloud, well, where's the wall? There is no wall. Your resources are distributed. Your users are everywhere, accessing things from any device. The very idea of a safe inside has vanished. And that's the big takeaway here. Our perimeter has shifted from a physical or even a network location to something much more abstract. It's now a constantly changing set of rules and policies that define who gets access to what. This means we desperately need a new security philosophy. So if the old model is broken, what do we replace it with? Well, that brings us to the zero trust mindset. And this, my friends, is where we completely change the game. At its absolute core, zero trust is built on one simple, powerful, and kind of paranoid principle. Assume you have already been breached. I know, it sounds intense, but in today's world, it's just smart. It means you stop trusting anyone or anything by default, and you start verifying everything, explicitly, every single time. This analogy is probably the best way to understand it. In the old castle model, once you got past the front gate, you were free to roam around. But zero trust, that's like airport security. It doesn't care that you got through the front door. You still have to show your ID and ticket at the check-in desk, then again at security, and one more time at the boarding gate. It's a constant process of verification. And it all boils down to these three foundational principles. Number one, verify explicitly. Every single access request has to be authenticated and authorized. Number two, use least privilege. Don't give anyone the keys to the whole kingdom. Just give them the one key they need to do their job, and nothing more. And finally, number three, assume breach. You have to design your systems knowing that an attacker will get in eventually. The goal is to contain the damage and make sure they can't move around. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how do we actually, build it? Well, the really good news is that AWS gives us all the building blocks we need to make this happen. And chances are you're already using a lot of them. So let's map this out. For that first principle, verify explicitly, we're talking about using things like IAM Identity Center and requiring multi-factor authentication for everyone. For least privilege, we can use IAM roles for role-based access control, or RBAC, and then we put hard limits on those roles using guardrails and permission boundaries. And finally, to assume breach, we can use a multi-account architecture to wall off our different workloads and use VPC endpoints to keep our network traffic off the public internet entirely. So when you put it all together, you get this really clear three-step process you can apply to any application. You start at the network level, creating tiny isolated segments with security groups. That's microsegmentation. Then you layer on really strict identity controls with IAM. And to tie it all together, you enforce those rules across all of your accounts using governance tools like service control policies, or SCPs, which act like a master firewall for your whole AWS organization. Okay, now for a reality check. Because let's be honest, this sounds fantastic in theory, but making this shift, well, it's not always a walk in the park. It's a huge change in both technology and mindset. You're likely going to run into a few key challenges. First, just the complexity of managing all these granular permissions can be a lot to handle. Second, you have to balance security with usability. If you make things too secure, your team can't get their work done. Third, it does take resources, not just to build it, but to maintain and monitor it continuously. And maybe the biggest one of all, this isn't just a tech project, it's a cultural shift. You have to get everyone to stop thinking in a trust by default way. But even with those challenges, it's so important to see this as more than just a security upgrade. So let's wrap this up by looking at what adopting zero trust really means for your organization. And this quote just nails it. This is not just a defensive tactic. It's about fundamentally building a better, more resilient, and more modern architecture, one that's ready for whatever new threats or business needs come your way. What this really gives you, at the end of the day, is one single unified security strategy. No more different rules for different networks or locations. You have one consistent set of principles protecting your data, your users, and your workloads, no matter where they are. And that's really the question to leave you with. Take a hard look at your current security. Is it truly built for the dynamic, perimeterless world of the cloud we live in today, or are you still trying to defend a